moving on to the next speech, also a very important person who is here with us today. It's Mr. Jun Wong Chong, Deputy Director of Electronics Division under Singapore Economic Development Board. He's here with us to share his insight into a topic which is very interesting for all of us, especially when it's coming from a government agency. It's about transforming Singapore's semiconductor industry. So, Mr. Jun Wong Chong.
Hello, good afternoon. I think everybody can hear me. Since I have lesser time, and I know that I have to talk after Mr. Pistorio, so I can be flexible in adjusting the amount of time that I'll require. So I'll just go straight into my presentation. My name is Chong Jun Woon. So I look after the electronics sector within Singapore. And I wanted you to just have 4 key takeaways for today. Capabilities, control tower, more than more, and bio-GPS. So I'll take you through my presentation. First, I'll start with an overview of the electronics sector. Just to give you a flavor that we are not about promoting just chips. We promote anything from the box to the submodules to the components. Components meaning the chips, the actives, as well as the passives. And these are our market leadership position today. Pretty self-explanatory. But what I wanted to show you is that when we talk about building the electronics sector in Singapore today, it is not only about semiconductor, it is not only about IC design, it is also about the boxes. We need the whole ecosystem, the whole supply chain, the whole supply base actually to be in Singapore today to make it work. So it's a vibrant ecosystem that we promote in Singapore today. And this is also the reason why electronics is the single largest contributor to Singapore's GDP. So last year, electronics actually grew by about 26.9%. It's 3 times the global industry average of about 9%. So last year, our contribution to GDP is about 7%. And semiconductor itself, as a subsector, is also the single largest contributor as a subsector at 4.6%. It's broadly due to 3 reasons. First, the proliferation of electronics. I think electronics makes life better for all of us. We today carry iPads, carry tablets, carry smartphones. It really changes life. So the key messaging in there is, how do we get the right message to the public that electronics enhances the lifestyles? Electronics is everywhere. It is the proliferation of electronics that is driving global demand. The second key reason is that if you look at where are electronics components made, where are the boxes made, you would more often than not turn to the back of your gadget and know that it's made in some part of Asia. So the whole supply chain is actually moving to Asia. And Singapore, being centrally located within Asia, obviously would benefit from such a shift of supply chain. And the third reason is we need to do our homework. So we need to make sure that Singapore's industry continues to transform into higher value-added products, as well as transforming into R&D. So what have we done so far? So this is the history of the landscape in terms of the growth of the output of the Singapore's semiconductor industry. So you will notice that I think Mr. Pistorio mentioned, the first fab in Singapore was actually a 5-inch fab. Today, we are chasing 12-inch fabs. We are chasing IC design. So it is important for us to continue to invest in R&D, in advanced manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing to actually offer capacity for companies to want to come to Singapore to source from this advanced technology capacity. But more importantly, the need, as Mr. Pistorio also mentioned, the need to continue to invest in R&D. So if you take a quick snapshot in a survey that was done, semiconductors itself actually contributed to close to half of the private sector R&D, or they call it BERT, business expenditure on R&D. So 9 of the world's top 10 fabless companies are in Singapore, and they carry out R&D. The top 3 foundries are in Singapore, and they carry out R&D. And of course, 3 of the world's top 6 OSATs, outsourced semiconductor assembly and test players, they are in Singapore, and they carry out R&D. So I talked about R&D and high-value manufacturing. So if you look at the right side of the chart, you will realize that for foundries and OSATs, we will continue to work very closely with them to make sure that they have advanced manufacturing capacity, but more importantly, also continue to invest in R&D. R&D, whether it's process development for advanced technology nodes, R&D, whether it's in 3D packaging, through silicon via kind of technologies. But if you look at the left side of the chart, you will realize what we are trying to do with the fabless industry. And that is really to build two things. One, capabilities, and two, control tower efficiencies. So what is it about capabilities that we are after? Well, I always say that we do not produce enough babies in a year. So there are only so many things that we can do. So selectively, where we try to talk about IC design capabilities, we put a little bit more focus on analog and mixed signal IC design. So what we have done in last year is actually to launch Virtus. It's our latest IC Design Center of Excellence baby. So we have 14 research organizations under the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, but within NTU itself, we have launched Virtus as an enabler to actually couple the academic partners with the industry partners. So they become a very critical node, and their focus is really in analog and mixed signal. I talked about our fabless foundry ecosystem. The ability for the suppliers, which is the foundry players, the OSATs, to actually provide the capacity for the fabless players. But what is also very important is that the fabless players need to build up IC design capabilities. But the other very important reason is that the fabless companies are demand drivers for the foundries and the ecosystems. So what do I mean by demand drivers? If you look at Singapore today, we are centrally located. Within 7 hours flight radius, we cover half the world's population. So that is important from two aspects. One, we can easily reach out to the market in Asia. And two, we can easily reach out to the resources in Asia. So this chart is a busy chart, but the key takeaway is that if you talk about our central location within the geography, it is obvious. What is less obvious is it is our tax and trade environment. So if you talk about the China and India economies today, I'm not sure whether many of us know that we have actually enhanced our double tax avoidance treaty network with China, so that when you pull dividends from China to Hong Kong or China to Singapore, it is the same 5% withholding tax on dividend outflow. Today, we have enhanced our treaty network with India. So when you invest in India, there is no capital gains tax when you dispose of those assets. So these are just nuggets in terms of what we have done on the Singapore government's perspective in terms of enhancing our trade and treaty network, so that when companies set up their control towers in Singapore, it will actually help them to take care of their operations in China, like I've mentioned, in India, like I've mentioned, and also in the Southeast Asia region. So the ability to carry out IC design, R&D, the ability to become that demand driver as they become control towers, make it appealing for why Singapore still remains attractive for some of the fabless companies or the startups. I think there's a lot of talk about more, and more than more. So maybe I had a sneak preview at Mr. Pistoro's speech. But if we look at on the left-hand side, more is about miniaturization. So our play in the more sector is about market share. And we know that market share is not derived just by chasing fab capacity. Market share is actually derived based on, like I mentioned, R&D and control tower. And if we become attractive for R&D and control tower activities, it will drive the demand, which will then build the capacity. So that is our more play. But not forgetting that as a diversification strategy, as an integration strategy, we are also very interested in more than more. So I think there's already a lot of talk from Mr. Pistor and also the question from Mr. Jagadish in terms of the more than more space. But what is important for us is as we pursue more than more, whether it's compound, whether it's optoelectronics, there is one key growth area that we're not forgetting, and that is really in the area of MEMS. So today we have Institute of Microelectronics, which is our research organization. They have partnered with TowerJazz for niche capabilities, niche volume. They have partnered with Global Foundries for commercial volume. They are also partnering with tools and products companies. And the end intent is to be able to build end-to-end capabilities in the more than more space, or specifically in the space of MEMS. So that if you are a company that wants to do everything in-house, you would come to Singapore for the factors that I've mentioned. If you are a company that does not have the full value chain, but would like to come into Singapore to tap onto part of the value chain, to do whether it's front end, whether it's back end, there is an ecosystem that we are trying to build all the way from lab to fab in the MEMS space. So feel free to come talk to us in the area of MEMS. So MEMS is another area that we're very interested in. So I talked about three things. R&D, control tower, MEMS, and last but not least, this is our new growth drivers. I mentioned that electronics is the single largest contributor to Singapore's GDP at 7%. We need to maintain our fair or unfair share of the market share. But more importantly, we need to look for new growth drivers. Whether in the silicon space, whether in the more than more space, if we invest ahead of time significantly in these growth drivers, we believe they can be winners that can contribute to Singapore's GDP. So how I remember this is just BioGPS if you go on a clockwise basis. Bioelectronics, today we make 1/3 of the world's hearing aids. Today we make 2/3 of the world's microarrays. Today we make a lot of chips that goes into in vitro equipment, diagnostic equipment, equipment that is outside the body. But you may have read that Medtronic has invested in a manufacturing campus in Singapore doing implantables, doing in vivo. So our vision for bioelectronics is, can we continue to extend our lead in the in vitro space, but yet slowly venturing in the in vivo space? In the in vivo space itself, it's all about proven technologies because anything that has to be implanted has to be tested, reliable, and it works for many years. But if we can push ahead in the in vivo space for bioelectronics to go into the body, it will be a mind-changing, it will be a different ball game that we are playing in. So we are looking for partners that can partner us to get chips into the body. In the green electronics space, later you'll hear from Andrew about energy efficiency, but really in the green electronic space, what we're talking about is energy efficiency, clean technology. But today, Singapore as a living laboratory, you know that the Singapore government is opening up our infrastructure for companies to come to Singapore to do test bedding. But a lot of these test beddings are still being done at the system level, at the infrastructure level. So being responsible for the electronic sector, I asked myself, must it always be the systems players that test bed their solution and then look for cheap chips? Or can the chips be defined and designed in such a way that they can redefine the whole infrastructure or the whole systems integration? So bottom line is, must it be systems to components or can it be components driving systems? So, and if we can identify applications or solutions that builds a system around a component, then maybe from the Singapore government's perspective, we could open up certain parts of the infrastructure for our components company to test bed. So that's really our vision for green electronics. In the printer electronics space, it's really about being able to produce chips in a cost-effective manner, roll-to-roll printing, large format area printing. So in that space itself, A*STAR, Agency for Science, Technology and Research, has dedicated $15 million, anything from lab to fab. So they are developing roll-to-roll processes and they are looking for partners. So if you have a product that you think you can make it cheaper without using the lithographic manner, please come to us and we can link you up with A*STAR. Last but not least, secured. Today I look after components which are very small. We talk about 22 nanometers, 40 nanometers. But if you know that Singapore also has a very huge oil and gas sector that actually facilitates companies like Schlumberger's, Halliburton's, FMC Cameron's to go deep water drilling. So in the areas of secured electronics, what we are trying to do is, can we design chips that are secured, that are ruggedized, that can go marinized, that can go underwater for deep water drilling? So in this area itself, our research organization, Institute of Microelectronics, we have actually set up a lab that can test chips up to 300 degrees Celsius. So the ability to design chips that are ruggedized and secure enough for deep water drilling is something that we think that there will be a lot of synergies with the oil and gas sector. So in short, those are the 4 growth drivers which we think can not only add color, diversity, but hopefully also contribute to Singapore's GDP in the longer term. So with that, I end my presentation. I mentioned there are 4 key takeaways: capabilities that we need to continue to build to make sure we are attractive to companies, control tower functions which we'll continue to enhance using the tax and trade environment so that it makes sense for you to come to Singapore, not just from a geographical perspective, but also from the tax and trade front. More than more, we talked about it a lot. MEMS is a key area of focus for us. We are prepared to pre-invest, invest ahead of time. And last but not least, we believe BioGPS are 4 new growth drivers that we are keeping a close watch on. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong. Before we let him go, again, I would like to open the floor for questions. Any particular questions from anyone? This is your only chance to talk to the government. You have a... Okay, so if you have any other questions, just write it down. You can email it to us. We can also go through it during the panel discussion. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jun Wong, for your speech. And I would like to invite Mr. Mike Holt as the VP of SSIA to provide a token of appreciation. Thank you.